Hi everyone, welcome to the Communication and Conflict YouTube channel promoting mindful communication and growth through conflict. I'm Alan Sharland, creator of the Communication and Conflict website at communicationandconflict.com. I'm also director of Chaos Conflict Management in the UK. So I'm a mediator and a conflict coach, and I provide training and consultancy as well as mediation and conflict coaching. And as I said just now, the theme of this YouTube channel is to promote mindful communication and growth through conflict. And most of the videos I've made so far have been more about more effective communication. So what I want to look at today is the ways in which conflict can be an opportunity for learning and growth. So the first two videos in this 3-video series that I'm going to make are more about ineffective responses to conflict. So the ways in which we can get trapped into responding to a conflict which never work. They cannot work because we're not devoting any time or energy to trying to resolve them. But the third video will look at the ways in which any resolved conflict does get resolved. So the ways in which actually we can all be very creative in the way that we respond to a conflict. And most of the time that's what we do. Most of the time we resolve conflict very effectively, so well that we don't even realize we're doing it. But where we get stuck in a conflict, we're going to be using one of the two ways that I'm going to introduce today in video 1. Then in video 2 there'll be the second way, and then in video 3 it'll be about the ways in which we effectively respond to conflict, the ways that we use creativity and self-awareness and kind of consideration of other perspectives in order to help us to move forward in the situation. So today's video is about the avoidance response. Video 2 will be about the competitive response, and neither of those are effective responses and never lead to resolution of conflict because they're not focusing on resolution. They're focusing on different ways of responding which aren't looking to resolve things. And then the third one will be looking at what I describe as learning, connection and insight, what I call sometimes the 3 cheers for conflict, the 3 ways, the 3 aspects of any resolved conflict. And these are all things that I've noticed and seen and been able to kind of formulate through observing people that I've worked with during the last 23 years now as a mediator and trainer and conflict coach. It's drawn upon the observations of how people do resolve conflict, or the ways in which they remain stuck in conflict. And obviously how they remain stuck is what we're going to look at in the first 2 videos. But how they resolve it is going to be looked at in the 3rd video. So without much ado, I'm going to call that introduction to an end there. After this little bit of introductory music, I'm going to move into the theme of the first video today, which is going to be ineffective responses to conflict, the avoidance response. So, ineffective responses to conflict, the avoidance response. So, this response is probably one of the ones that keeps most conflicts kind of simmering underneath for quite a long time, because it's quite seductive in that it gives a kind of temporary sense that the problem has gone away. So, if I've got a problem with someone and I avoid meeting up with them, or I do things to make sure I'm not in their presence, then it can feel to me like the problem's gone away. But actually what it means is that I have to then live my life worrying about where this other person is. So it hasn't actually resolved the issue at all. But in a sense, because there may not be the difficult interactions which have gone on in the past, by staying away from the person, it can feel as though that aspect of it, probably more like the competitive response, which we'll look at in video 2, as if that aspect of it has stopped. But what it doesn't acknowledge is that there's still an impact on me because I'm having to live my life concerned with where the other person is. And if I were to do that with, say, more than one person, 2 or 3 people, I could end up kind of almost not going out, because I've got to always worry about where all these different people are to avoid any kind of engagement with them. And the ways in which that kind of manifests in all sorts of different contexts is at work. You can sometimes have managers who keep 2 people who are not getting along in some way, or who have had kind of fallouts or arguments in the workplace. They keep them separately. But what that means is that the manager then has to think more about whether those 2 people are working together or not. Then they have to focus more on that than whether they're actually using the resources available to them and the skills that people bring to their job as effectively as possible. It shouldn't be the manager's responsibility to deal with the personal difficulties between the 2 people involved. The manager should be able to trust that they will bring what they're paid to do in their role to work with them. But unfortunately, quite often that's not what happens, and people are kept apart. And again, if you imagine a manager who uses that strategy, perhaps with more than just 2 different people, and maybe they've got 3 or 4 different difficult relationships between people, they're going to spend more of their time just trying to make sure people aren't in each other's presence than they are about helping people to work together as a team. So it's a very ineffective way of responding to conflict, because it doesn't deal with the issue. An analogy that I'll probably speak of a few times, certainly in all 3 videos, is the idea of a boiling pot. So in this situation, we've got the pot is boiling and bubbling over the edge, and problems are arising. And with this one, it's about putting the lid on and then walking away and pretending that it's not boiling anymore, because the lid is covering up the kind of the sense that there's a problem. But obviously in time, with the lid on, it's going to burst open anyway. So it doesn't work as a response. I'll give you the analogy for the other ones in the other videos, but the analogy works, I believe, because it is very much about putting the lid on, pretending there isn't a problem anymore because we can't see the boiling of the kind of the interactions and the ingredients involved, and just walking away. And because we can't see it boiling anymore, we tell ourselves that the problem's gone away. But in disputes that I've worked with in mediation, I've come across people who've said that they, in certain roles, they've enjoyed coming to work normally, but then because they've developed a problem with somebody else, they've stopped coming into work. So they might be jobs where they can work from home more often. And what they then find is they're only coming into work for the absolute essential things, because it means they're not going to chance upon meeting this other person. So people who like to come into the working environment and engaging with people, they stop going in because they're worried about coming across this person that they've got a difficulty with. And of course, often it's the other way around as well. The other person has the same feelings towards the other person. So you've got 2 people who are just not turning up for work in all senses of the word, both physically, but also kind of in what they're bringing to their job. But it's also true in kind of family environments as well. You get people who fall out in family environments and will stop going to family gatherings because somebody else is there that they've fallen out with. Whoever it is, whether it's the mother-in-law, whether it's the brother-in-law, whether it's the brother, the father, whoever. People stop going to those family gatherings, and often in a lot of these cases, other people get affected as well. So say you've got a parent in a family who's fallen out with somebody in another part of the family, then often it will mean the whole family doesn't go to that interaction with others. And so there's kind of a breakdown in family relationships as well as a result of the avoidance response. And a lot of people may be saying, well, what do you do instead? Well, the point is, as we'll come to in the 3rd video, it is about finding a way of resolving that difficulty, even if just for ourselves. If it's possible, if it's the case that the other person or people involved don't want to interact and try to resolve things, there are still ways that we can support ourselves with those situations, so that we don't suffer the damaging impacts of the avoidance response to conflict. one of the other things about the situation, just looking at my notes here, one of the other things about the situation is that what we can tell ourselves is if we manage to stay away from someone, or maybe that person leaves, or even more sadly, the other person dies or whatever, which can happen in kind of family relationships or sometimes in workplace relationships, people leave and get another job. People can think, oh, phew, that problem's gone now, because what they do is they associate the problem with the person rather than the behaviour of the person that they found difficult. And the thing is that what that means is they're always going to come across other people who behave in that way. So it hasn't resolved it for that person to go away. What it's just meant is that that person has temporarily not had to deal with that kind of behaviour anymore. And it's because there hasn't been an opportunity to learn how to respond more effectively to that behaviour, it's guaranteed that at some point in the future somebody with similar behaviour will turn up in the person's life. And so it hasn't actually resolved it. It just means it's been temporarily set aside. So again, while it can feel as though the problem has been resolved, it hasn't actually resolved it. It's just been temporarily set aside. And it's guaranteed that at some point in the future, just because people do behave in those ways, we will come across someone who behaves in a similar way, and we still won't have developed a different way of responding that supports ourselves. I mean, on the training course, I use a kind of a simplistic analogy that when we train people, I kind of talk about, say I had a difficulty with anybody who wears orange, then I would be spending my life walking around noticing all the people who wear orange because I've got a problem with them, because for some reason I've got that problem. But the day I resolve my difficulty with the idea of people wearing orange, I know it's a silly example, but it's basically the same for any behaviour. The day I resolve that, I'll stop noticing people who wear orange because I won't have a problem with them anymore. But that will be about me learning my different way of responding to them. But until I do that, I will always be coming across people who wear orange and be fed up with them and upset with them or try to avoid them. So while avoidance feels seductive, as if it's a way of effectively responding to conflict, it isn't, because it means we become trapped in a life of always having to know where other people are so that we can then avoid them. So it's like we've got this kind of ball and chain that we're always kind of stuck with, that we always have to stay away from that kind of behaviour. So we'll have to live our life according to where people who show that behaviour that we've got a difficulty with are living or working. So we have to then be kind of dependent on knowing where everybody else is. And as I say, if that happens with 2 or 3 people rather than just one, we can live a very kind of insular life, because we just don't go out. We don't go out and meet other people because we might come across this person or these people who are acting in the way that we don't like. So hopefully that's summarised why the avoidance response just doesn't work, even though for a while it can feel like it does. It doesn't work. What can be useful though is when we're conscious that that's what we're doing. Because when we're conscious that that's what we're doing, we can start to acknowledge it, and then we can start to act differently. And that's when we can start to do what I'll describe in video 3. But quite often people are reacting in the avoidance way without even knowing that they're doing it. And then starting to feel in their life, why is everybody like this? Why do I have to stay in and not meet all these horrible people out there? But actually it's just that we haven't learned a way of kind of supporting ourselves in the environment that we live in, even though those people are there. But as I say, the most important thing is to become aware that we're doing it, because when we become aware, then we can start to decide, do I still want to respond in that way, or do I want to create a different way of responding? And even if we still choose to avoid, we're then taking control of our decisions until we've found a way of responding more effectively. But all the time we're not conscious of it. And I hope this video will help you to reconsider any difficult situations you're experiencing, about whether you are responding or reacting with the avoidance response or not, then it will help you to start thinking, okay, so if that's how I'm doing things, how is it affecting my life? And how can I start to do things differently? And as I say, hopefully video 3 will give you more support in creating those different ways of responding. So that's the ineffective response to conflict, video 1, avoidance response. Hope that's of interest, hope it made sense to you. If you like it, please leave comments below, like the video like button, subscribe to the channel for future videos. There's 2 more coming in this series of 3 videos, as I say, and hope to see you soon. Thanks for watching.